Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, first I'm going to say you guys missed one hell of a pre-show. We forgot we were supposed to be recording a podcast, and we spent like 30 minutes talking about what it was like to be a feral child in the 80s. And
we should have filmed that. We should have hit live, right in the middle of it. No warning, just hit live.
There's not a feral child. I was rabid.
I didn't get bit by the squirrel, but I too was rabid and also feral.
So
not
before we
feral, but feral.
Before we bloviate a little bit and then dive into the movie review, we're going to let Mr. M.D. Bonchair introduce himself to our listeners and viewers.
Wrong, dude.
I mean, normally I'd be like, Boncherie, but I mean, I want to make
M.D. Bonchair.
If we are going to go French, we will go French.
You go all the way French.
That's right. Even so, the last name it comes from Ireland. Okay. I don't get it. The only other nation with lots of that last name is Ireland for some reason. I think they escaped Belgium or something. Anyway, MD Boncher. I write two different series, an epic dark fantasy called the Kinawazi Saga because reasons. The old Icelandic method and an old Ojibwe phrase. And then I also have a high-flying science fiction pulp punk fantasy or adventure, and that is Tales from the Dream Nebula. So if your idea of a good time is a smirk and a warm phaser, that's kind of the right thing for you. If Ming the Merciless is what you would call a fun time, it's the right thing for you.
I'm not saying I'm cold-blooded, but I'm just saying the Khan didn't go far enough when he invaded.
The Khan didn't go far enough?
I'm just saying, you know? But, okay.
Blackjack Pershing in his invasion of Mexico City. And then he got called back.
Yeah, Patton was or Pershing was an interesting character. I've done some research on him and his experience for a different project, and I'd be interested in drinking a beer with that dude.
Oh, dude, the stories he would tell, dude was a wild man.
Yeah, and the whole blackjack thing was actually an insult. It started off with the N-word man because he was willing to. Because before he went to West Point, he was going to what they call a primary. No, there's a name for a school. It was a certain college designed to train people to educate black students. So it was done on the fly. I can't remember the name of the college. It's a certain type of college for learning to educate children of color. But and so they called him the N-word man, and then he got some officer in the army was like, hey, if you want a better education, you could go to West Point and it's free, and it'll, you could come back and do a better job because you'll make connections. Because he was really passionate about helping the African community, and then they barely talked to him for the entire time he was at West Point because he was the N-word man, and then they got the lecture about having to be gentlemen, so they started calling him Blackjack instead, and it sort of stopped. If he had wanted to change it, he couldn't. But
I didn't know that story.
Yeah, the reports about him, if you read it, like, dude was so classy. He's just like, he would just look down on them, like you're lesser people, and then he'd do the quintessential bless your heart approach to the judgment, where it was like iron wrapped in silk, except for that's normally used to describe Southern women. But dude was like, he was hardcore. Yeah, and then he was involved with the conversion of the Army cav from horses to tanks, because some of the generals wanted to liquidate all the horses, and he grew up in the South, and he's like, no, we're not killing all the horses.
Yeah, like
he wasn't the only one, but he was one of the ones involved in doing some of the pardoning, because there were several cav soldiers that ran away with the horses and either took them to Canada and let them free or gave them to the Indians on the reservation, which I imagine as a horse soldier back in those days had to feel really, really weird. I mean, because they grew up, the generation before them, fighting the Indians, right? And then suddenly they're giving them all these horses to save them. I imagine their pappies were rolling in the graves for that one. But yeah, it's an interesting period of history, that conversion of the industrial age into what we would colloquially, I guess, called modernity. Blackjack's an interesting fella. So
strange cat.
He's a strange cat. Although he gets some criticism for his involvement in World War I. Apparently, he didn't believe that the truce was happening, even though he got the order. So he just kept doing frontal assaults and stuff. And then even the French were like, "Dude's too crazy. Like he doesn't know what tactics are. He just charges straight ahead." I'm like, "Well, isn't that what you
colonel during that war?"
No, he was a general. He was leading in World War I. He was leading the American expeditionary forces.
Yep,
I didn't know that.
They said
he was a colonel and he got promoted afterwards. I remember. The stories I've read were mostly focused when he chased Pancho Villa.
Yeah,
down back into Mexico. He was already had a star.
In fact, as somebody who helped do research on the creation of gun trucks as we used them in Iraq when I was there in modern tactics, the very first use of what we would call a gun truck now was Blackjack Pershing chasing Pancho Villa because he had to carry the big gun and the horses couldn't. So he put it on the back of a Model Ford. Was it Model A, I think, at the time? Whatever the Ford vehicle was. He put it on the back of a truck and he just, had some soldiers stand back there, and it wouldn't have been a Browning then in World War I. It would have been probably the Maxim gun?
No, it would have been a Browning.
Did we have the the 50 cal, but did Browning do the 30? Because 30 millimeter was in vogue in World War I.
Browning also made the 30 cal, but it was water cooled. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And then the French had their version, which I can't remember what that was either.
A failure?
A failure.
Yeah.
No,
I can't remember it either.
Now I'm going to look it up real quick, but it was definitely an interesting period. Like World War I.
The British had the Lewis gun.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that stupid Half Moon magazine that was open.
Yeah.
All right, so the
show shot. The show shot.
The Maxim gun was the British as well as the Lewis gun.
Yep. Yeah, the show shot was the French one, and like I said, it had that crazy open-sided magazine that was in a semicircle.
Yeah, it was so weird looking.
Jammed like crazy.
Yep.
And Sir Hiram Maxim, who invented the Maxim gun, actually was testing it as far back as 1897. So yeah, Pancho Villa could have had a Maxim, or they could have had it on the fight against them. And apparently he was famous for a 2.1 millimeter cannon that was portable. Interesting. All right. I'm a history nut and I will go. So the reason I mentioned all that is because World War I was what inspired today's episode. Because, there's that famous Christmas truce on the Western Front where the British and the Germans stopped the war on Christmas. They had an unofficial truce, meaning unofficial. The generals didn't approve it. The generals were really mad after the fact, but the soldiers were just like, yeah, screw you, buddy. We're going to do our thing. And they literally walked out in the middle of no man's land. They were trading chocolates and cigarettes and pictures and gear, played soccer in the open field, not proper American football. They were kicking the soccer ball around, weirdos.
During that time, soccer was still pretty prevalent in American society.
In rugby too, because you got to remember Teddy Roosevelt invented American football trying to make rugby safer. After a couple in the Yale-Harvard game, or maybe it was the Yale-Princeton game. I know Yale was one of the teams. They had players die on the field playing rugby, and Teddy Roosevelt was like, "That's not sporting. I'll make it safe."
I'm going to give you leather helmets that don't do shit.
Well, they changed the rules too, but given what you know about Teddy Roosevelt, the idea of him making something safer tells you all you need to know. If
that's how dangerous it was. If Teddy Roosevelt is saying, "Hey, man," the guy that got shot during his speech and kept going, if that guy tells you, "Hey, man, maybe we should probably make some rules for this shit," you should probably listen. The dude was beyond hard ass, like he's like titanium assed,
All right, so. Looking for, we were originally going to do an episode all about the legends surrounding Santa. We didn't get enough interest. We're penciling that one in for 2025's Christmas for season 5. Because if we do enough time lead up, I can get, I can do a better job preparing for it and getting more interest, I think.
Enough lead time, Batman can defeat God.
Absolutely. And so
has enough lead time, he can make a subject out of it.
So, and then of course I lost power that night, so we had to reschedule anyway. And so I was like, "Hey, does anybody know any military holiday movies?" I was thinking something about like Bella Wood, The Christmas Story there, or that truce. And Bon Charlie said, "How about this movie, A Midnight Clear, set in World War II?" And I'm like, "Okay, I've never seen this, but it's got Gary Sinise in it. So how freaking bad can it be?"
His first movie, by the way.
And so I watched it.
He did Mice and Men before this.
No,
he did.
It was after.
Oh, he did that after? Okay.
Yeah,
well.
1990. This is officially his first movie. He did Mice and Men with John Malkovich. Like it released later. But officially, according to IMDb, this is Gary Sinise's first movie.
Yep, it predates The Stand, which is the first thing I've seen Gary Sinise in by 2 years, because that was 94 is the miniseries.
Right. And he was good in that too.
He's one of the main reasons I paid attention to the guy.
Right?
Wow.
For me, Gary Sinise will always be Lieutenant Dan.
No, yeah.
And that's what
his
he's
iconic role.
And he has the band, the Lieutenant Dan Band, which they're really freaking good. If you've never listened to them, go on to
I literally
music or whatever.
Disney World at Epcot Center, 2001. I literally ran into him. We were on the O Canada ride, and we got out, and it was pouring rain, so everybody was hiding in there. And I saw him from the front, and he had these terrible BCs on and a poncho. And I was like, I swear, I think it was there, that it was him. And so I left my wife at the time and said, I'll be right back. I'm going to go take a look. And I mean, okay, this is your typical Florida warm downpour. New Year's Eve, he's there for a big event. But, in the time he's with his family. And when I go back, I look around, I turn around, looking dead in the face, realize, yeah, I'm dead on target. And I sort of walk by him and I just say, pardon me, Mr. Sinise. And I just keep on going. and what happened then was just miraculous, because he vanished in less than 3 seconds as Disney employees realized he'd been figured out. Boom, gone. He went through a side entrance, was that fast. Yeah, he was Kaiser
Sose style.
Yeah, it was that cool. But that was my only brush in with the guy for real.
The only time I met anybody really famous, I think, was probably the USO tours when I was in Iraq. And I met Ed McMahon when I was in high school. We were touring colleges on the way back from some ROTC field trip, and he was stopping by, and all the girls were like, "Oh my God, it's Ed McMahon!" I'm like, "Who the hell is Ed McMahon?" And he tapped me on my shoulder, and he's like, "Hey, sir, I'm Ed McMahon." And I'm like, "Oh, nice to meet you." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know who that is." Okay, and I went back to whatever I was doing in the store. And because, like I said, I was ROTC, so I had the short hair. We were wearing our ROTC polo shirt. And then he was like, "Well, would it entertain you, or would you care more if I told you I was a Korean War fighter pilot?" I'm like, all of a sudden, I was interested in what he had to say. And so he took me to the Notre Dame coffee shop that's there. I can't remember the name of it anymore. And he bought me my first ever latte, and he sat down and told me about flying planes in the Korean War as a Marine aviator.
That's a cool story.
And then he sent the school ROTC, like he sent his minions, whoever they were, to donate a lot of cool merch. I didn't get any of the merch, but I got the latte, so I win.
Yeah, the latte is the most important part from
although when I told my mom that story, she was like, if he doesn't give you a check, it doesn't count as meeting him. And then I had to look up the Publishers Clearinghouse deal.
He was Carson's wingman, dude. Like, he's a legend.
Yes. He's the man that created the talk show wingman position.
Really? Wasn't Carson the guy that did the USO tours during Vietnam?
No, that was.
No, that's Bob Hope.
Bob Hope was the big USO guy. Johnny Carson didn't really do those, but yeah, the Tonight Show, it was Johnny and Ed.
Johnny and Ed McMahon.
Yeah, and Doc Severson. Yeah, Doc Severson over on the band there. All the good stuff.
That's when late night was great, man.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is your most unique Christmas memory? Stabby, wake up!
Shit,
this is for you, Stabby. What's your most unique Christmas memory?
My most unique?
Yeah, we wanted you to coordinate by being here with us. She's gonna kill me later. I know it.
So, in all fairness, I did warn you guys that I was basically falling asleep during this movie, and I have no clue what you're talking about.
We're not talking about the movie. We're just doing the BS in the beginning.
Okay. Well, my most interesting was my mom was really sad right after my brother left for boot camp. and my big brother, she was really sad because he left right before the holidays. But I still had my little brothers, and I felt really bad. And I was like 16, and my mom just could not bring it in to try to do anything. So on Christmas Eve, I took a string of lights and I drew out the outline of a tree on the wall with push pins in the lights, and then put little homemade gifts just at the base of it so that they had something in the morning. And I think that was the most interesting one because it was the most memorable. They still talk about it all the time. They're like, man, I don't know who pulled off the Christmas light tree, but that was so much fun. It was so memorable. I really didn't think Mom was going to get it together, and it was great that she did. And I was like, yeah. But it was fun, and I'm glad that I was able to make a difference in their lives and give them that memory. But that had to be the most interesting one, I think.
Okay. What about you, Boncher?
Well, there's a couple that stand out more around getting a certain gift. Probably one of the few true white Christmases, snowing on Christmas Eve, when I got my first Nerf football. So this is like really early 80s. And my uncle, who was semi-pro at that time, or shortly before that, before he kind of got out of playing football, he went out and played catch with me in the street in the snow with that. That was kind of a nice memory. Though I got to admit, getting my first BB gun at the age of 7, but
was Red Ryder?
No, Red Ryder. It was not, but it was a Daisy, and my parents were, shall we say, a little upset about that. They grew to basically hold Grandpa to, you teach him how to use this safely. But yeah, those I don't really have much in the way of like extreme, unique memories that way. A lot of my Christmases were very fortunately out of central casting. So, and I guess there is one story that I just can't mention.
All right, what about you, Nick? You got any weird ones?
Family skeletons, so call it that.
I got 2 actually. I have the Christmas where I discovered Santa Claus wasn't real, and then the other one is where I was a drunk elf, and I will explain both. So we were living in Missouri at the time, Misery. We just had a nice fresh snowfall. It was Christmas Eve. I stayed up late, and I was going to catch Santa. I was going to catch him. And I had a vent in my bedroom. I lived on the second floor. My room was on the second floor. My parents' room was also on the second floor. But the vent from the second floor looked right down to where we had the Christmas tree. Mm-hmm. And if you open it up, you can see down. So, and things got weird. I'll leave that part out. So I hear rustling down beneath me. Oh shit, it's Santa. So I get out of bed, I low crawl to my vent, try not to make any noise. And I look down the vent. And I look down, it's my mom and dad, and they are putting the presents by the tree. I got an AK-47, an MP5, all like cap gun stuff, because toy guns were cool as shit in the 80s. They looked real. And G.I. Joes, Captain Power, like everything that I asked for Christmas. The G.I. Joes that I wanted, they're laying them all out. And then it got weird because then they started making out. And I'm like, yeah, I'm already scarred because of the whole fucking Santa thing. I'm going to go back to bed because I don't want to see what's going to happen next because that would scar my 8-year-old brain. So I go back to bed. So that's that story. The drunken elf story is when I had kids, and they had asked for a trampoline. They're young. They believe in Santa, the elves, all that shit. We were doing Elf on a Shelf, all that stupid stuff. The things that parents hate. And we went to a Christmas party at a friend's house, and I imbibed a little too much that night. I'm drunk as fuck. I didn't even drive home. Me and my ex-wife drive home. So I'm getting ready to go to bed, and she goes, "We got to put this fucking trampoline." I'm like, "Fuck. No, we'll just put the box out there and put a bow on it. It'll be fine. I'll do it in the morning." She's like, "No, that trampoline needs to be up when they wake up in the morning." We got home at like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm out there assembling this trampoline till 4 a.m., knowing damn well that those kids are going to wake me up at the butt crack of fucking dawn. I don't know if it was like I put it together. She just sat there and watched me, which was stupid. Like, why aren't you helping? You know, why am I the adult in this situation? That's not cool. I'm drunk. I'm putting the springs together, you know, the trampoline together, all that stuff. And I'm like, it had a netting on it because she was afraid that the kids would launch themselves into the neighbor's yard or whatever. So I put all this stuff up, and I take one of the dogs, well, the only dog that I had at the time, I had Merrill, and I put her on the trampoline, and that was a good test run. She didn't fall through, nothing broke, nothing fell over. But still, I'm like, well, these kids are probably going to be rough to it, like they are with all their other stuff. So I'm like, well, we'll see in the morning. We're either going to have a great Christmas or go to the hospital for a broken limb. So they wake me up, and I think it was about 7 o'clock in the morning. And we go out there, and the kids go out there, and they're jumping on it. They're just super stoked. They're having the best time on it. And they're like, that was so awesome for Santa's elves to put it together for us. And I'm just over here like, yeah, Santa's elves, as I'm putting bourbon in my coffee. I'm like, Jesus, don't even get credit for it.
That's the worst part about being a parent at Christmas is all the best gifts end up having their Santa on it instead of your name, so you don't even get credit.
Yeah.
Although most parents, you know, earmuffs if you're listening with your kids, most parents will put the hardest to wrap ones as the Santa gift.
I made sure when the whole Elf on the Shelf thing started, that was the year I told my son there was no Christmas or there was no Santa. And I told him in the sweetest way I could that it's a way for parents to teach their kids how to believe in things they can't see, like faith and love. And it's an amazing thing, and you'll get to do it for your kids. But there is no Santa, because I could not deal with the disappointment on his face when he would come home from school and tell me how his classmate's elf had showed up. And I was a single mom at the time. I didn't have money for that. So I was like, I can't do it. I have to tell him the truth. So there was no elf. There was no elf, you know, having met master battles in the kitchen. But he was a trooper. He's like, so I shouldn't tell the kids downstairs? I was like, no. Don't tell the kids downstairs. But I never had to do the Elf on the Shelf.
Okay. So I guess I guess I always had kind of a normal Christmas, you know, like not quite Norman Rockwell, but very boring. So the only thing I could think of is one of the times Christmas in 2004, I was in Iraq, because I was there in 2004 and 2005 for Christmas, because we got there in November 2004 and we left December 2005. We were at a base that got hit. And so, you know, when they call guns up, it doesn't matter if you're assigned to the base or not. If you've got the machine guns, you go to the wall. And we get there, and I guess they were doing some sort of Santa thing for the locals, because they tried to interact. Like we were fob jumpers, so we never stayed in one place long. But the places, the troops that stayed in one place long would, like, you know, win the hearts and minds or whatever they call that BS. And so we got there, and literally, like, we're manning the wall because there was supposed to be some sort of attack, and Santa's standing right next to us. And I'm like, oh, so Santa really was a badass. We weren't making it up in that anthology, because here's a guy in a Santa suit standing there manning the two
bodies.
Right.
Just remember, Saint Nick at Council of Nicaea beat a guy up over doctrinal differences.
Right, but no, it was, and I wish I'd remembered that, because that could have been a cool story right there for our anthology. But that always comes to mind when I think Christmas, is standing on that wall. And I can't even remember the name of the base. I just remember they told us that's where Saddam Hussein had his equivalent of the CIA and the torture prisons. But that's all I remember of the place. And then standing on the wall next to a guy dressed as Santa Claus, manning a 240. That was an interesting experience. And I'm like, we were really good that year. I'm just saying.
Awesome. Thank you. You just need to keep doing it.
What the heck was that?
Oh, sorry. That was my phone. One of my war buddies sent me something. I was checking it. I thought it was going to be silent.
At least they didn't do the jump scare to the prawn. I've gotten my army buddies done that. And the first time it happened, my kids were in the same room, but I didn't know. And I'm like, nope, can't watch their messages when the boys are around.
Yeah, you got to be careful with the boys, especially the war buddies, man.
Right.
It's some weird stuff.
And it's always just to get you that last minute. It's like, not going to lie, you had me in the first inning. It's one of those things. Or the Rick rolls,
Oh, the Rick rolls are the worst. Or the jump scares, like, oh, what are we seeing here? And like looks closer at the screen, and next thing you know, there's like a giant freaking spider that jumps on the screen. Your phone goes, whoa!
Wasn't that the whole plot of the movie The Ring, where the girl climbed out of the TV? The jump scare wasn't like the whole plot.
Oh yeah, Ringu. Yeah.
I never got into those.
Yeah, I didn't really like it.
Shit out of me.
I did like Poltergeist. I watched that as a kid, and that was kind of creepy. And then you hear they used real bodies for that scene because it was cheaper.
Oh, the swimming pool scene? Yeah.
I'm like, those poor actors are probably still in therapy.
Yeah.
Those are movies we're going to have to revisit in season 5.
Absolutely. Around
Poltergeist is. I own Poltergeist. It's one of my favorite horror films. My all-time favorite is The Shining, though. Even though those are two of the movies that terrified the crap out of me as a kid.
I used to fall asleep like a couple of years ago. I would put The Shining on because the musical score would put me out like a tranquilizer dart. Like doom, doom, doom. Like I would be out.
We're trying to get back on Christmas stuff though. So first,
wrong holiday.
Dear listener, if you have a Spotify account and you like audiobooks, if you send me a message, I will give them away till I run out of codes. I have some codes for version 1 of the audiobook to Sleigh Bell Rings for free, the audiobook. But you got to do them through Spotify. That's how the codes work. We have to, for various reasons, but we're moving the hosting of the audiobook. So I have to use those codes before we move them over next year. So if you want a free audiobook of that, hit me up, and I'll be giving them away till they're all gone. And then for you, if you've got any interesting Christmas stories, you should drop them in the comments. Tell us about them, and we can all have a conversation. That's kind of the fun of doing this, is when you guys actually engage and you start talking with us in the comments, or telling me I'm wrong, or Stabby needs to stab Nick again. We saw that one a few times.
No.
They deleted it when Stabby sent him a message. I was like, yeah, really? Where do you want me to hit him? And they thought she was serious, so they deleted the comment. That was
so bad.
That was right around this summer episode when you guys. It was right. It was the first episode with the knife you've got in your hand, Stabby.
I think it's so funny because they think they're real, and I mean, you know what a real knife looks like. They're obviously fake, and I put them on my face. If they were real, I wouldn't be poking myself.
So many inappropriate jokes there that I will not make today.
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing is what are your favorite Christmas stories, Christmas movies, whatever? Like, for us, Nick and I, we've talked about this. We're a little bit of a history nerd. So the Christmas truce in 15? I'm pretty sure.
1915.
We've both been fascinated by it. In fact, we've had conversations if we could find a way to make that into a sci-fi film, like basically World War I in sci-fi. Although how you justify those tactics in a modern world, that we haven't quite wrapped that one up, but we've talked for years about somehow turning that scene into a book just because it's so moving, right? Like
they tried in the series Space Above and Beyond. They did have an episode like that.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. I don't know if I can recreate it. Like, you're a more talented author than I am. So, but I could add tactics and maybe a terrain map.
But yeah, so we've talked about for years, like, look, we love speculative fiction that have like the holiday themes, right? Like, so if you've got anything you want to recommend, and since we're on it, Blanche, what is your favorite Christmas story? Like one that you watch, either movie or story, and it could be from your childhood or now. What's your favorite one that you revisit?
Favorite Christmas story that I revisit? That's a lot harder than you think. I guess I try to watch like It's a Wonderful Life every year. That one is always fun, but I don't know. I don't really have a strong draw that way. Yeah, that'd be about the closest I have to it. Sorry.
So for me, I like the Charlie Brown Christmas because I watched that as a kid.
Oh yeah, that's got.
I like the Polar Express, the book, because my mom read it to me when I was little. Mm-hmm. And then I watched the movie when it first came out with my kid, and we rewatched that every year. But we also rewatch the Home Alone marathon, even though after the first one it gets a little weird. And at a certain point in time, if you keep forgetting your kid, maybe CPS needs to step in. I'm just saying. Like at a certain point in time, or
you need to stop coming back for the kid.
Right. And then the Wet Bandit thing always amused me because when we were away one year for Christmas and we came back, our neighborhood had been robbed by the same teenagers. We know they were teenagers because the stuff they stole was like they hit my stepdad's tool collection. They left all the brand new expensive stuff and took the cheap stuff just because it looked shinier. So like they left the $100 tool and took the $10 one, right? Like clearly they're idiots. They left the new electronics and took the old stuff because they didn't know what they were doing, and the old stuff was a little bit lighter. But when they were there, every house they were at in that neighborhood, they sat down and had a bowl of Captain Crunch. So the local news jokingly called them the Captain Crunch thieves. And since Home Alone has the Wet Bandits because they plugged the sink to cause the flooding, that always the memories are linked in my head. Because we had when they robbed our house, they stole my baseball card collection, and but they didn't they stole it. They didn't steal it. They destroyed it. Like they ripped them in half. And I'm like, if you like it, take it and leave. I can at least respect that we have the same taste. But to rip it up and leave it, that's just insulting. But worse, I had a Nolan Ryan rookie card that I couldn't do anything with because I told my mom I had it. I got lucky at an estate sale. My Grandpa Hanley loved estate sales, and I bought one sight unseen. It was just 2 of the cardboard boxes that came in that were really long. The baseball cards would come in. 2 of those and happened to have a Nolan Ryan in there. They didn't know what they were selling, so I paid $10.
I'm just for you, JR. Give me their names.
Well, so when my mom went to make the claim, they're like, no, this at the time it was worth several thousand. I don't remember what it was, but they're like, no, ma'am, like you have to have special insurance for this high value item. Why didn't you get insurance? And I'm like, see, Mom, I told you it was really worth that. But that was the only card they took was my Nolan Ryan rookie card. So
even the robbers knew.
They at least knew what they were getting. And it's it's not like those things have serial numbers, so it's probably be pretty easy in a pre-internet age to sell those.
Oh, easily.
So, but yeah, so that was my my funny one. So for me, I go back to the Charlie Brown Christmas Special, Polar Express for both reading it and then watching it with the kids, and then the Home Alone because that's a tradition with my youngest. We do every year. We watch the ones, and the higher the number, the dumber they get. But he really likes that fake black and white movie. Was it The Fallen Angels or whatever it was?
Dirty Wings.
Yeah, an Angel with Dirty Wings. Like we actually spent some time looking for it, and then we realized it was literally the only scenes for the movie are the ones they played in that movie. And yeah, and then the 2 actors that were the ones that was getting shot and the one that were doing the shooting, they actually had the opposite roles, but the one that was doing the shooting had a sit-down role. And the guy that got that role in the movie, they swapped because he had just broken his hip, so he needed to sit down so he could do the bit. And then, of course, the other guy was like, when they did the part 2 and they had a new scenes for it, and he didn't get to do it, he lost the acting gig because he had traded parts in the last movie. Sometimes the movie trivia can be fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with that said, do you have anything that spikes your memory now that I've bloviated and gave you time? That's my new favorite word. It was on my November and December, or excuse me, my November big word calendar was bloviate was the word of the month. So.
Oh, Lord knows I'm an expert at that. Unfortunately, no, I don't. It didn't. I mean, nothing really jumps to the top of the list. Like I said, every year I try to watch It's a Wonderful Life, just because it's a great comfort film for me.
What about you? Stabby, you got a favorite Christmas movie or Christmas story? It can be one you read as well, just Christmas.
We typically do here in our household, we do Family Vacation because we love our Griswolds. We always do we always do Die Hard, and then we finish the night off with The Grinch. Growing up, though, we didn't make it to a third movie because I was raised Catholic, so Christmas Eve we were at midnight mass.
Man, if you had midnight mass was really hard on people with allergies to like and asthma because all the incense, like that was
That's when Nick just screamed behind me, smells and bells.
Yep. I've heard it called that too.
Last year we wanted to go to a midnight mass. The problem was that all the midnight masses around here, they're doing Southern gospel level Christmas music, which I'm sorry, I was raised with boy choirs and cantatas with orchestras and more operatic than opry, and there was nothing really around the area that was doing a true midnight or close to a true midnight mass. So we was like, well, what about a candlelight service? We drove all the way to Charleston, West Virginia, which is about an hour and a half, 2-hour drive from us, to go to a Lutheran church that was doing a candlelight service that was more of what I'm used to. I was raised in Wisconsin where all the Lutherans are stored. I was raised ELCA Lutheran and sort of have been a bad Lutheran ever since. I'm a recovering Lutheran and God knows what now.
Grandma always said the Lutherans was Catholicism without the guilt.
No, Catholicism without the saints. Yeah, there you go.
Episcopalian.
Yeah, Lutherans don't have the confession, they don't have the saints, and but they got
Catholic light.
Yeah, it's exactly it. But there are two different kinds of Lutherans out there. If you didn't know that, there's dark Lutherans and light Lutherans. If you listen at all to A Prairie Home Companion, the light Lutherans are the ones that believe in ice cream socials and in a fun vocational Bible school if they have it. And dark Lutherans believe in repentance and canning and
I did a reenactment. I did Civil War reenacting in college because it got me extra credit with my history teacher. And it was fun to shoot black powder guns. Not gonna lie. I won some marksmanship contest shooting the 1863 Springfield. But that was one of the things that we saw there is they actually had someone doing the old school Southern fire and brimstone preaching just to kind of like, because it's more than just the battle part. Like you're seeing a slice of life. So they have some of the women, they'll have women there in the clothing showing you what it was like to run a kitchen back then. And in this case, they happen to have a legitimate preacher in his own right who practiced one of the Cotton Mather's fire and brimstone preacher sermons, and it was like no wonder everyone was afraid. Like, if you don't have TV and the internet and this is all you're hearing, like, Jesus is gonna rip your soul out. Right? Like
so my son started going to youth group on Wednesdays with our Baptist neighbors, and I was raised Roman Catholic and Nick was raised Irish Catholic. And so he would come home and tell us what he was learning in class. And he's like, if I just love Jesus, he'll love me and I'll go to heaven.
And I'm over here like, no.
I'm like, have they got to the fire and brimstone part yet?
We believe in an angry God.
Like, he wasn't always so forgiving, Bubba.
I mean, there's a whole New Testament, but we're in a religious podcast, and I'm
you never got to Lot, and what happened to his wife?
I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
I'm going to Valhalla, and if that means I have to throw my juice box at the nurse at the nursing home to get there, I'm there.
It's in battle. Whack.
I mean, if it's my battle, would be throwing the juice box at the nurse.
The free
You have
sun
to
to
make
the
sure you're
face.
kicking and screaming as you go. Kicking and
Right.
screaming. They'll fight back.
I want to die in my sleep peacefully, like my grandfather, not like the people in the car with him kicking and screaming. Is that the old joke?
Yeah. I want to die peacefully in my sleep, not like the rest of the passengers in the car that he drove over the cliff.
Right. All right. So, Stabby, favorite Christmas movie kind of thing that you guys do in your family?
I told you.
I was giving you a chance to elaborate more. I'm trying to get us back on track.
Christmas Vacation, because we love the Griswolds.
They make more sense the older you get.
I feel the parents so much more the older I get. And I'm over here like, you know what? It's almost Christmas and our front yard caught on fire. And if it weren't for the fact that I had to help him put out the fire, I probably would have been guarding his junk too. Like, I'm just saying. But we love the Griswolds. We always watch Die Hard at least twice, usually once on Thanksgiving and then once on Christmas Eve. And then we end it with the Grinch. And we change up our Grinch every year. We don't do the same Grinch. So we'll either do Dr. Seuss's or we'll do Jim Carrey's or we'll do the new one. But we switch it up every year. So it's a different Grinch every year.
For me, was it the Grinch? Was it Jim Carrey? He's also the one that did Ace Ventura. And he did, what was the other one he did where I always think of him? Yeah, Liar was a good one, but no, there was another one. The one where he puts on the green mask.
The mask?
Yeah. Those are what I think of when I think of Jim Carrey. I mean, I know he did the Grinch, but Nick, just so you know, watching a mirror doesn't count as watching the Grinch. We're going to put that out there. I know you're part of
Actually, Jim Carrey just did an interview and he said that he absolutely hated doing that movie. He said once they got him in all the makeup and the fur, he felt like he couldn't breathe. He was constantly like trying to rip at his prosthetics and everything. And they actually brought in a couple army trainers to teach him how to deal with it in the same way that they would deal with being prisoners of war and being tortured. And so throughout the whole filming process, he was chain smoking and randomly punching himself in the leg. So he'd just be smoking and then he'd all of a sudden be like, and just punch himself in the leg to keep his mind off of it. And then he'd keep going, it's for the kids, it's for the kids, it's for the kids, it's for the kids, as he's chain smoking in between takes. And he said in the interview, he's like, now that we have better CGI, it looks more realistic, I would do the Grinch again because we could do it without putting me in all of that again. Mm-hmm. And I could actually enjoy being in the character without having to feel like I was slowly dying.
Yeah, he said it was like putting on the mask makeup was like shoving his head up a frog's rectum.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for that. They interviewed the lady, I can't remember her name. She was the female native chick on Stargate Atlantis, and she was she was one of the Wraith. She became the Wraith Queen, and it happened to be right after she had given birth. So she's breastfeeding her kid in the trailer, you know, and all of the staff would they've talked about it in some of their panels they've done at Comic-Con out in California. And like all of the other actors would be like, man, your poor daughter, you're scarring her. She sees mommy and she looks up at this monster. And if you haven't seen Stargate Atlantis, the Wraith are basically like space vampires, right? But cooler. And so like if you watch some of the, you know, because you're celebrating a birth at Christmas, right? So I just, every time I get to Christmas, I remember that interview she did because it's so hilarious how like all of the actors would just mess with her because she's trying to breastfeed this baby wearing this full costume. And they said when that period of the show ended, she was still not done feeding the kid that phase, and the kid wouldn't feed from her because she didn't have that mask on. So she had to put some of it back on so the baby would nurse.
Oh my!
That could just be a story because it sounds funny for the panel. Because who knows? But it's funny. So, all right, Nick, favorite Christmas movie or story, whatever.
No, I already told you the stories. No,
like Christmas novel or Christmas movie, not actual stories from you.
Well, I mean, we read The Night Before Christmas, in the house on Christmas Eve. You know, it's a tradition passed down from my grandfather to my father to me. I had to buy a new book because my dad's version, we'll just say it disappeared. I think he lost it. But we do that. And we talked about Christmas Vacation and Die Hard, but we didn't talk about the new tradition in the house when it came out is Spirited, which is a retelling of...
I've got to see that one.
So it's a retelling of A Christmas Carol done with Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell. Thank you. I was getting there. And I'm not really into musicals, but when I watched it, it really spoke to me. It touched me. So that has become a new Christmas tradition that we watch on Christmas Eve.
Cool. All right. And so speaking of Christmas, since we're sponsoring with our Christmas anthology again, because it's appropriate. Again, if you hit me up and you want a Spotify code to download the Spotify audiobook, hit us up. And with that, we're going to air that beautiful bean footage, and then we're going to come back and talk about this movie. All right, 3, 2, boom.
Ho, ho. Oh, hell. Is that sleigh bells ringing in your ears or a few rounds from an M60? You wanted the jolly fat man to bring Yuletide joy, but the season has gifted you with a heartbreaker and a life taker. Badass Santa. Grab your eggnog and camouflage candy canes. Strap on your bulletproof holiday stockings and prepare for thrills and kills. From blood-stained rebellion at the North Pole to a Black Ops raid on a distant planet, these 18 action-packed tales will show you Saint Nick as you have never seen him before. It's all you'll want for Christmas.
All right, welcome back, and thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. And with that, we're going to talk about the movie A Midnight Clear. And so before we do that, I am going to pull up the details so we can talk about the movie. So the movie, obviously, is called A Midnight Clear. It is directed by Keith Gordon. The budget was $5 million, and its box office profit was $1,526,696 to be exact. So yeah, it did not earn out on the. Although I don't know at what point they stopped tracking, because over the time, I imagine if you sell the streaming or you buy the box set or whatever, at a certain point in time, the money will eventually come back. I don't know when they stopped trailing. Nick, you're muted. I don't know when they stopped counting that.
I doubt they made a box set for that movie. It's a good movie, but I doubt
you can buy a DVD of it.
Yeah, but you can also watch it free on YouTube.
That's hurtful.
Sorry.
So I watched it free on Prime, but Prime pays a fee to watch it there. Like they're paying the distributor. So the movie is 108 minutes. It was released on April 24th, 1992. That did surprise me. I expected a Christmas launch given the movie. It was distributed by Interstar Releasing in the U.S. and Sovereign Pictures globally. And then for the ad copy, the Ardennes Forest, December 1944, a squad of 6 U.S. infantrymen is sent to occupy a house to use as an observation post as the German army is expected to advance through the area. However, the Germans seem oddly friendly. I think that works for me as ad copy. It's pretty spot on. Everyone else agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
That wraps up the movie in a nutshell.
All right, well then let's before we start talking about the poster and the movie and all that, Nick, can you throw the trailer up for us?
Sure can. Stand by. Here we go.
At the front lines of life, near the end of innocence, became the beginning of manhood. The events that shaped their lives can't help but touch yours.
I think we got a chance to make something good come out of this for everybody.
A midnight clear.
Now we're all muted.
Yes.
Dead air. We had dead air.
Yes. This dead air was brought to you by.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself. So when we do a share where it lets me upload the file, it mutes us automatically and undoes it. When Nick shares the screen for the trailers, because the ability to download from YouTube is now difficult if you don't pay, which means we just share the screen like Nick does, and so I have to manually mute us, which also means manually remembering to unmute us.
Yeah.
Oops. So would this trailer make you want to watch the movie?
No, and having watched the movie, this trailer is a complete misrepresentation of what the movie's about.
And the voiceover sucks, not gonna lie.
Oh, it's so bad. Like, it makes you want it's like they're trying to sell like War of the Roses, if you remember that movie with Michael Douglas and all that. It's like if you saw the trailer and watched the movie, you'd be disappointed because, like, if you love the trailer, you're gonna be disappointed in the movie because that's not what that is.
It's a terrible sizzle reel, essentially, for the movie. It doesn't. It gives you the mood to a certain extent, but it doesn't sell you on any of the content or the story. There's no connection in that way. I mean, this is really a powerful story of young men caught in circumstances well beyond, in the circumstances of war, which is well beyond their control, and they're trying to survive. But the whole point of the whole thing in the end is that everyone at this point of the war is just trying to survive.
They used a deleted scene in that movie because that scene was not in the movie with she wasn't a prostitute, but they paid her anyway.
No, that was in there. That was in there.
Rachel Griffin.
No, where they're all sleeping together. That was not in the movie.
Yes, it was.
It was.
No,
in
it
the
wasn't.
movie.
I literally finished watching it before I came on here. That was not in the movie. There were individual. That shot was not in the movie.
Okay.
Okay, which shot are you talking about specifically? So I can.
Where they're all passed out together.
No, I saw that in the movie I watched on Prime.
No, that's not what you saw because I literally just watched it before I came on here, and I'm telling you that shot was not in the damn movie. My phone was not in my hand during that whole movie because I take this seriously. You know, that shot was not in the movie. That was the deleted scene of all of the boys laying there with Jenny or whatever her name was.
Janice, actress Rachel Griffin.
Yeah. You know, that wasn't in the movie. So it really set up this thing that was like almost kind of, God, do I even dare say it? I don't want to get the show canceled. No, I'm not going to say it. Fuck it. But yeah, that shot was not in the movie. That was a deleted scene. And
deleted shot.
That one particular shot was not in the movie. Everything else was. I don't think it sold the movie for what it was or what it was supposed to be. I was a little disappointed in the trailer, because the trailer is supposed to give you it's like a sexy lampshade, it gives you enough information without revealing the plot. I don't know. I didn't like the trailer. The movie is great. I love the movie. The trailer is dog shit.
The soundtrack is surprisingly good.
Oh, the soundtrack's amazing.
Mark Isham knocked it out of the park. Very minimalist, similar to what you got from the movie Witness. That was
there was a lot going
on
on in that soundtrack too, and very established sounds from the music that have been carried over into other stuff, other trailers, other forms, like even up to today. You know, some of that really instrumental sound, those serious parts, they're still using that. Because
it's interesting. I'll bet you that the trailer was done before they were done with the movie in the editing booth, and the soundtrack was done, because it's such a unique soundtrack. And then we get, you know, that classical piece of music, which basically makes it feel like you're getting ready for some period French piece. You're like, no, yeah, it doesn't really do anything for it. There's no sort of musical drama to it. But yeah, and the movie, although I consider this a Christmas movie, it doesn't focus on Christmas as a holiday as we know it, but more onto the essentials of the values of Christmas in a way, and sort of the peace on earth, goodwill towards men. Yeah, the spirit of Christmas and peace on earth, goodwill towards men. More of the religious aspects to it. And maybe a little bit, small fraction of how the holiday would have been viewed in the 1940s. So it's definitely not. So you don't want to walk into this film thinking that it's going to be a serious, Christmas film where Christmas is the focus.
And it's not a war. It's set in war either. Yeah. Like, it's not a war movie either. There's no action.
It's the same way
a little bit of action.
Yeah.
But not a whole lot.
It's limited action. It does have some. It is a war movie, and it's very interesting. It's done so well with such the small cast and budget. But just like It's a Wonderful Life, most of the film doesn't deal around the holiday of Christmas, and Christmas in It's a Wonderful Life, despite it being considered a Christmas movie, is ancillary to the entire story in the end. But it speaks strongly to the ideals and the spirit of Christmas. This does the same thing, except set basically in the Battle of the Bulge, the roll up to it. So
I just went through some of the movie covers. They didn't really make a poster. This was an indie kind of low budget production. So there were several versions and variants of the cover. I think there are several variants out there of the edits that are out there, because the scene he says wasn't there, I saw. I will prove it later.
It wasn't there. It wasn't there.
It's the shot, the individual shot, not necessarily
that shot with all the boys together with Janice is not in that movie. You didn't see what you saw. I'm
going to prove you wrong later, but anyway. But I will say this was more of a psychological story, an emotional thriller. Like, you have mother who's going nuts. Father's trying to keep it all together. And you have this Major Griffith.
Yeah. Oh, man.
The Major, yeah.
Yeah, Major Griffith.
Wanted to go to battle.
John C. McGinley. Holy crap.
The world's best asshole actor.
Yes.
I mean, he's the kind of officer that would get flagged or fragged, and you should give the guy that did it a medal. Because I'm like, you watch him, he's so incompetent that he got promoted to major, and then he's just literally like throwing people to the meat grinder like it's World War I all over again.
All right, so I was part of what it was then called an INR platoon, intelligence and reconnaissance. Eventually, just skipped the intelligence part. I was a reconnaissance troop for like 10 fucking years, and those are the missions that they used to set us on, especially in Baghdad in Iraq, my theater, my war, my reason for PTSD. And that's what I really related to in this movie. It's just like, okay, first in, last out. We'll give you a call when the shit happens and let you know where we are. And then you go there and they're not there. Like, that's historically accurate.
No, but it's in the way, like, I get it. I worked with the intel guys, the INR guys, because, they were giving us updates on route security when I was running the convoys. Right. It's one thing to go out there and to run a mission because the information is vital, and yes, it's dangerous. Nobody has a problem with that. We accept that when we accept the job to be grunts. It was the way he did it that was just throwing lives on, at the meat grinder.
Oh yeah,
his
tactics was like, I'm gonna throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, and then he was going to court martial the people for not dying, essentially, later.
Right.
And his theory was, I want the best intelligence possible, so I want the smartest troops possible. And so he wasted some brilliant people. Well, you never know if they would have actually turned out anything that way. But at the same time, it's sort of like, you take your premier, your premier top of the shelf level equipment, and then you just beat on it as general issue. And there's a certain amount of barbarism to his absolute disdain for these troops that could have been something really special if treated properly. But no, he used them. It's like trying to use a Ferrari as your daily work car on the farm. Yeah. No, like a work car on the farm or a work truck.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to break down. It's not equipped to do that type of stuff. Now, like when Ethan Hawke, which huge fan of his work, been a fan of his since his first movie in The Explorers, and if you've never seen that movie, go see it because it's awesome. He has a way to bring a certain emotion into his characters that makes you feel for him. Mm-hmm. And he was able to do that when he was a young kid playing in Explorers all the way up until the Black Phone, Training Day. Like the dude is a phenomenal actor. Insidious. Like I can go on and on about his
Lord of War. You really see a change in him there too.
Lord of War 2. Yeah, that's a good one for him. He's got a really good expression as an actor to bring the audience in. And I love him. He's probably one of my favorite actors, top 5 at least. He did a phenomenal job about a newly minted hard striped sergeant who doesn't want to sew his stripes on. I was the same way. I was a sergeant for like 2 years, and I never sewed my hard stripes on. I put the pins on because they're readily available, but like on my dress uniforms, never sewed them on. Which is funny because I got promoted to staff sergeant and still hadn't sewn on my hard stripes. He's a great actor, and he brought so much into that role, and you were really kind of like he is the first person viewer of the story that is going on. He is the narrator.
Won't is a great character.
Oh yeah, Won't. Oh, God, yeah. That is such an Army nickname too. Will not like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even today, you would be known as Won't because we want to.
So that's one of the things. Speaking of Army, when they were moving so they were taking the Jeeps with the 30 cal mounted on it, and they're on the way to
no rounds.
No, they had rounds.
Mm-hmm. No, they had rounds, but when he engaged the 2 frozen soldiers, there was nothing in that belt.
Oh,
yeah,
being fed into it.
I thought you meant in story. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
No. It was an error on the production team, but he's like letting it rip, and there's no fucking rounds. It was fun. I laughed. Yeah.
So they dismount the Jeep because reasons that are going to go movement to contact essentially, and they're moving in a squad, the worst fire team wedge I've ever seen with no spacing. And someone's like,
"Don't get me started on the tactics on this shit, man. We'll be here all fucking night."
And they're like raising the person going to the front's like raising his fist, the halt signal, and that part was right. I mean, they used the right hand and arm signal, but it's like, what does it matter? Because like one bullet could practically kill everyone, let alone a grenade or a mortar round.
Right.
So I'm like, I don't know if I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on, World War II squad tactics. Presumably it'd be similar to what we did. And if that's the case, that is some of the worst soldiering. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't know that when they made the movie. They could have been showing see, these guys, they're smart, but they're not practical. Right? That could have been done on purpose for plot points. And I will say we didn't cover this, but the movie Midnight Clear is based on a book by I think Paul Worley. Right. But it's definitely a book that this is based on. But yeah, watching them move to contact to the 2 frozen soldiers, and it was basically a Nazi a Wehrmacht soldier and the relief squadron the unit that went before them on this mission that never came back. It was one of those guys, and they were both locked in a death embrace.
Yeah.
They were posed as dancing.
It looked
If you
like
look
one
carefully.
was stabbing the other, but
It didn't look like one was
wasn't
stabbing the other. That's how I got it. I didn't get the cat dancing. I got the, dying, stabbing each other.
Yeah, but like physiologically, that wouldn't have flew if they were actually actively engaging one another. Like,
Yeah, they would have slumped to the ground, so they wouldn't have frozen that way.
Right. So, like, when you get further in the film, and it starts to make sense. Like, they weren't fighting; they were dancing. Like when they're prying these guys apart, cutting and all that.
So one of the things you learn is the Germans that they're fighting had survived Hitler's failed assault on Russia, and so they made it back from the Eastern Front. A lot of their compatriots did not. A lot of them ended up in gulags as slaves to the Russian commie machine.
Right.
The ones that didn't turn tail, because there was a large significant cohort of German soldiers that joined the Red Army. They saw the writing on the wall, and they became the backbone of the professional Russian army.
Right. They chose the winning side, as they thought.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and it was the winning side as far as that goes for the German side.
Yes.
They just would have been better off going to the Allied forces instead of the Russians.
This movie is so effed up in that regard.
Well, no. I'm talking about, we're talking history. Like that actually, those soldiers actually happened. The fact that the Germans that turned tail, you said they chose the winning side. No, they
chose the side that wasn't going to kill them. They chose the living side. We'll call it
right. That. If they had gone to the Americans, they would have been POWs and then freed in East Germany, and they would have been okay. Or no, West Germany, and they would have been okay. But anyway, so that's being here. The fact is, the historical undercurrent that they had survived the frozen winter of Russia and made it back when significant numbers of Germans didn't, already told you without saying anything beyond their crappy uniforms that were like falling apart that these guys had been in some shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they were just trying to survive. They were just trying to survive to the end because, as they put it, they were all old men and young boys. That's all that was left, and that was their unit.
And so what was left after all the fighting since 1939.
And so seeing them, like I like that. I mean, they got it right where they wouldn't surrender to the Jew, but they would surrender to the guy with the stacked sergeant stripes as some sort of officer. The Germans would have known that was not an officer rank. They knew what our uniforms looked like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, officers wear shiny shit. Enlisted wear stripes,
and they would have been exposed to it because our stuff wasn't that different than what the Brits and the French were using, and all of the Allied forces, with the exception of the Russian.
Different from the Germans. The Germans had an inverted chevron system for their ranking system.
Theirs is color coded and weird, so it's not exactly a 1-for-1, but they would have been taught to recognize it because the Brits used it too.
Regardless, this is a technicality.
Right. So I'm saying is like the comical nature of those fake stripes that like they would have seen through it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now this guy could have seen through it and not cared.
I think we're kind of getting off path a lot on looking more at the military aspects and the actual accuracy than really sort of the nature of the film.
No, you're right.
I mean, I'm not trying to be the buzzkill, but at the same time, this is...
No, but sometimes you need to be reined in. I get it. JR gets it. Like, we get the historical accuracy, the military accuracy of things, because we're both history buffs.
I'm the civilian, so...
Before we leave the accuracy, one thing they did get right is, so anybody that's grown, and you know this, Balsher, given where you live, anybody that's grown up around snow versus people that have never, like there's a way you move on snow different than the way you move on sand, different than, so when they showed the Germans were basically practically ninjas, the way they were moving around out there in all that snow. And then you see the Americans, they're like freaking a bull through a china shop trying to force their way through the
crunch. Yeah.
That actually was one of the most accurate depictions of what life is like in the winter if you're not used to it. I've ever seen. I've made jokes on this podcast before that I did my desert training before my second Iraq mission in New Jersey in the winter with a foot of snow. Like I can relate to the Americans, like trying to just plow through it and hope for the best, because you're just not trained to to handle that. I mean, there's a reason snowshoes were invented, right? Like, I thought that the physical aspect of what that life would be like for these guys was some of the most poignant you've seen to show like how much it sucks to be doing that. Like they barely have any. They've got this large drafty mansion, and they've got that one tiny little fireplace that is only putting up so much heat.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just living
that one room warm.
Yeah, and then you hear what they're going through, and then in spite of all that they suffered because you watched it, the major comes and like, oh, you made a mess in the civilian's house. How dare you have that mattress there? I'm like, what did you expect them to do when they occupy? I wanted to kill Major Griffith so many times.
Oh yeah, he's absolutely one of the best, worst.
He's one of the best asshole actors ever. Like, you need an asshole character. John C. Quigley is your dude. McGinley is your dude.
Yep.
Like, I watched him in Scrubs. He was amazing in Scrubs. If you never watched it, he's just one of those characters. Like, he's definitely typecast to play that type of character. The character you hate.
Speaking of, one of the things I did like was the guy that played Lieutenant Ware, Larry Joshua, I believe.
Yeah.
Like most of the time when you do the close-ups of the face, like it takes a high level of acting skills to get that right, because the minutia of facial expressions, when you looked at him when they did a close-up of his face while he's listening to this major drone on, you could almost see someone who was dead inside, who had just seen too much and just didn't care anymore.
I've been there. I know that look.
Right? I mean, I have dealt with those kind of officers.
Well,
go ahead.
No.
I was going to say, we actually had one of those type of officers who wanted us to salute him in BIOP in the middle of the MSR. We're like, oh, let's line up for this because we didn't like him either. But like when you've dealt with that level of incompetence and all you want to do is kill them, but you can't because they outrank you. Like I felt that.
Sniper check, sir.
Right? And so like the actor that played that lieutenant, it was just like, I know you guys are getting screwed. I know this guy's a douchebag. I know he's ruining things, but like that those few moments he was on the scene and you saw his face, you're like, he sold me on his character.
Well, it was like from my point of view, it was that he was stuck beneath that asshole boss, and there's nothing he could do about it, and there's nothing he could do to really prevent just the hell he's raining down on his soldiers underneath him, except for maybe a few minutes of comfort. Even I mean, like I said, I've had lots of friends in the military, and I've heard lots of stories, but I've never experienced it personally. Thank God. I don't think I would have made it. I think I would have been Section 8'd out of there fast. I'm not I'm wired. I'm way too sensitively wired to handle that level of stress. So, I mean,
you'd be surprised.
Oh, I don't know. I think I would have snapped long before. I tried to get in, but that's a different story.
I don't know, man. Like I've met people across the prism of multiple, personality things, and it's like I was always shocked by the people that do very well, and then shocked by the people that don't do well at all. It's like it's very surprising. It's the guy that I have a weird thing about. I have a resistance to authority. It's in my psych profile, but I did very well in the military. What it gave me was the ability to tell superior officers, guys that were planning shit, that, hey, maybe this is stupid and we shouldn't do that. And and I got the reaction that most people would think, like, they would get all just up in their feels and be like, oh, what the hell do you know? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, but then I would go in there. I'm like, well, we have our supporting fire element aimed right at our main element, and that's probably not a good idea. Maybe we shouldn't do that.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we should just shift the supporting element, I don't know, just a little bit to the left, and maybe aim that way so the main element doesn't get killed by a supporting element. We're not doing green on green shit. We want green on red.
Murphy's Law of Combat. Murphy's Law of Combat. Incoming fire has the right of way. So does outgoing.
It absolutely does. Tracers work both ways. I'm also a big fan of that one. If you're within range of the enemy, you're in range of the enemy. Like it's shit like that. So the military aspect of it was very on point. Dealing with
culturally,
culturally. Yeah, even with Lieutenant Ware. And Lieutenant, your job as lieutenant is to shield your guys from upper command so they can complete their mission. And Lieutenant Ware was really good at that. Like he nailed that part. It was very believable.
He had 5 minutes to 8 minutes of screen time tops.
10 tops. Let's call it 10 minutes.
And he did a great job with that time. Now I do remember that at the beginning of the film there was a bet that where just in the monologue where not go or won't goes. There's a bet going on that he was Captain Griffin was a mortician in civilian life, and he was trying to drum up business.
No. So you got that slightly wrong. Okay. He was a mortician in civilian life. The bet was he was trying to drive up business for his Army compatriots in the same profession.
Yep. So I knew it was something like that. I'm sorry, I didn't remember it quite completely. But now, getting more to the Christmas part of it, there's I think in the middle of all this when they're in the chateau there, kind of keeping an eye out. What the indignity of this high value group is being used literally as a tripwire for when the German offensive kicks off, and I mean it's a waste. It's like using gold wire. It's using gold wire to let you know that the enemy's coming through, but then on top of it all, get into a situation where first off they're under extreme mental stress because they know they're in the way of this, but also their entire unit is sort of cracking up under the strain of it all because they have an ogre above them.
Well, but 2/3 of their unit.
Right, they lost 2/3. Yeah, they have 12 to start with and down to 5, something like that. Down to 7.
Yeah. 6 at the start of the mission, down to 5 after they lost Mother.
No, well, and then
down to 4.
And
they lost Father, and they lost the character that was the Jewish guy.
Yeah,
which is weird because he got shot in the shoulder. That is not a life-threatening wound. That didn't.
No, it went through his lung.
I was very mad about that.
Yeah, I was mad about it too because it did not look like a fatal wound, and the German prisoner that they had at the end
was shot in his thigh.
Yeah,
so
the reason they if you follow it, they were savable injuries. The reason they died, and they said that in the monologue bit, is because it took them so long to get to the rear, and the major wouldn't stop to loosen and tighten the tourniquets because it's basically he was so arrogant he didn't listen to them on the medical stuff, and he basically called them cowards. And he said, "We're gonna do it my way," and they bled out. That's how they died.
Bleeding out, yeah.
Yeah, they died from blood loss.
The Jewish soldiers shouldn't have died.
The Germans shouldn't either.
No, because it was well below the femoral artery. So I call bullshit on that with the production team and the writing team, the directorial staff.
No. If you factor in the incompetence and not getting them to proper medical attention,
that's the key.
The key was it was
even then, I'm gonna die on this hill. I don't do that much on the show, but this hill.
Every hill's a hill you're gonna die on. You're talking about.
There was previous shows where I died on many hills. I get it, but being an EMT, being a combat lifesaver, being a medic, doing all this crazy shit, like those wounds should not have been fatal for a 3-4 hour car ride in a Jeep.
But the Army was in retreat.
Cold would have prevented that.
The Army was in retreat, so we don't know how long they traveled.
I'm just going to say medical incompetence when they got there.
Yes.
Okay, so you also use the key word "should," in that you're right. They should not have died of it. That's the key point of it all, is that they died because Captain Griffin was incompetent.
Major Griffin, yes.
Or Major Griffin, yeah.
I'm going to demote him. He's fucking Lieutenant Griffin right now. Piece of shit.
He should be prisoner 14705 in Leavenworth for that. But yes, and that's the point. And that's what the lieutenant basically intimated, and as far as I was concerned at the end, that
yes,
they died because basically he did not bother to try and keep them alive. He didn't care.
And the guy that was with him manning the gun, the enlisted soldier that was with the lieutenant and the major, was basically a toady and a yes man who would have happily killed his own side if the major told him to. And that was kind of inclined when he's smirking at them while they're threatening the guys actually on the front lines, and he's in the rear, and he's smirking at the ones getting told they're shitty soldiers. And that Sergeant Knott is a shitty NCO because, oh my God, you're forward observation position where you're technically under strength because in order to have the full watch, nobody is sleeping. They didn't have enough people to secure that facility.
Nope. They were under power for too big of a situation.
Right.
And then to run into the German unit.
So, which were friendly. They wanted to surrender. So you're dealing with that.
So flipping it over to the Christmas aspect, then, since we're talking about the surrender, that I thought was one of the things that was handled very well, is because they did dip into history with sort of the Christmas armistice.
The snowball fight, yeah.
Yep, the snowball fight. Yeah. Then, of course, they get out there sounding like your grandmother saying "Fuck Hitler."
Yeah, it definitely brought in Saving Private Ryan vibes. You know,
yeah,
fuck Hitler.
My favorite was when they have the snowman and they don't realize it's a snowman yet, so he panics and he throws the grenade, and the sergeant on the line, and he's like, "This stupid German doesn't know he's supposed to die when the grenade hits him."
They had so many great lines, and that was something else that really was telling about the unit, is that they were out of their depths. Yes, they'd gone through training. Yes, they'd been doing this for a little while, but they were also, you saw very quickly that they were not good soldiers. They were trying their best, but they didn't know how, or they didn't have the
temperament. They were just trying to live.
No. I don't want to say that they're not good soldiers, because they've literally watched over half of. So if you watch them in the beginning, there was more than just one squad worth, right? This was a larger unit, especially if it's in control, commanded by a major. They've watched large numbers of their unit just get thrown into the meat grinder and slaughtered needlessly on missions that didn't make any tactical sense. And so I would just say that they were at their breaking point, not that they were bad soldiers. We didn't get enough to know one way or another the quality of their soldiering.
That's true. That you're right. They were pushed past breaking point. They needed to come off the line and either get some way rehabilitated, either to go back in or to go home.
And I mean, the fact that Mother found out like that his wife had been pregnant and lost the baby, and they just left him on guard duty like nothing happens. Like that should demonstrate two things. They were past the breaking point, because even in World War II, they would have given him a day or two to grieve. And two, you've got unit leadership that absolutely does not care about whether you live or die, because any halfway decent officer could have found a reason to put you in the rear for a day or two.
And that's what makes a lot of it so important on the whole idea of maybe we can do something good in all of this. I mean, you see Mother is, he's one bad day away from, one bad moment away from basically being, he has his freak out right at the beginning. You already know about him being at the breaking point, and he's about to either kill himself or kill somebody else that he probably ought not. And that's kind of what makes it a lot more special. And the gift of Christmas comes in sort of the form of the plan to try and make something good, where, hey, we capture a bunch of prisoners and we do an aggregate good to these Germans who don't want to die. We come out of this alive because nobody wants to hurt each other. We can make Mother look good and get him out of this war. He's done. He needs out. And unfortunately, the plan falls apart. Spoilers.
So we'll get to that in a second. So first off, when they show him breaking in the opening scene, he's basically
opening.
Yeah. So this was filmed those scenes were filmed in Park City, Utah. The weather for the snow and stuff.
Coldest winter they had in a very long time.
And if you watch him, like the idea that he's literally running and stripping off his clothes until he's buck ass and naked. Only thing he had on at that point were his glasses and his boots. And he's like dropping into the snow like he's overheating, and he's like trying to get into the water in this creek because in his mind he's like snapped and he's like, so hot, it's so hot, and he's like trying to drop into the water. Which is, yes, it's one thing. You, on the one hand, you realize dude's crazy, and on the other, he's also going hypothermic. And then they didn't take him to the rear to warm him up. They just put his clothes back on and be like, back to guard duty.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was telling in of itself, just that
bathing in the stream. Oh,
and the actor Gary had to do that for that scene. And can you imagine if there was more than one take? And that reminds me of the
Beastmaster conditions were 30 below during the day.
This reminds me of that Beastmaster episodes, and you talk about the scene where you had that female slave character and she's in the water and it was like sub-zero temperatures and she's having to constantly like throw on, like I'm imagining some poor whatever the staffer's called, like with a towel constantly like running up to Gary to wrap him in a bear hug because you know he was miserable.
Yeah, well, pain is temporary, film is forever.
I liked the one of the things they did well in this movie was light and dark and good and evil, and you did that because the daytime was so bright because of the snow, which fit from what the Bulge area was like in general. But then the darkness at night, where and they did those dark scenes or the muted scenes in front of the fireplace at night, where they're chasing their demons, and they sort of set the happiness against the light, and I thought the cinematography of all that, whether that was intentional or not, was brilliantly done. The lighting, the way they handled the lighting.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Did you notice anything like that from an artistic side, Nick? You can use your art degree now.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I went to art school for drawing. So cinematography stuff, like there's correlation between what I do and the cinematography side. If you're going to be a good comic book artist, you definitely have to read the 5 C's of cinematography. I think the movie was beautifully shot. Beautifully shot. I think the cinematographer did a really good job with that. I don't know, man. Like it really drew me in. The story was I'm going to be honest, the story was not that interesting other than the military aspect of it.
But it was compelling.
But it was compelling. And I think a lot of that comes from the musical score and the cinematography. That's really what drew me in.
And there's just something about that thing when you watch them firing the M1 Garand.
Yeah. The ting, 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 which is
the M1 clang.
I liked seeing them, the way they were dealing. Like a lot of war movies focus exclusively on the battles. What most people don't realize is most of the military is waiting around. 90% of the time you're waiting for shit to happen, and 10% of the time you're wishing it was the 90% again. And during the 90%, you're wishing it's the 10 because you're bored. And then when you're not bored anymore, you wish you were bored. And they captured kind of the essence of that.
What is the phrase I heard once? That Army life is most time is absolute painful boredom, followed by brief bouts of extreme sheer terror.
Yep.
Yeah. No, and here's the thing. This is one of the things that really drew me into the movie is because it definitely encapsulated a small unit, of a reconnaissance platoon, because that's what they were. Mm-hmm. They didn't address each other by rank. Like Will was in charge officially, but still it was a group discussion. And that brings me back to my time in Iraq when I was a young E5 and eventually an E6. We didn't address each other by rank because we were such a small unit. It was Nick, Steve, Mike, Ira. We knew each other's first names. We knew everything about each other because we were so interconnected interpersonally with each other's lives because we're all in this together. So it made us fight harder. And I think that's something that was encapsulated in the movie is they expelled that ideology that's really not shown in military movies. When you're in a small unit,
the best way they showed that is at the end, and this is how you know he's a total douchebag. Major Griffin is taking the live German prisoner because he thinks it's going to get him a full colonel thing or whatever. Like, because this is crown and he lets the guy die. And that's the tragedy too. We've already talked about that though. But when he leaves, the dead body, he just leaves that like, yeah, that's not my problem. And the idea that you're just willingly leaving an American behind, and then you see that they had gotten a bath. Where they heated some water and they were taking a bath because that was a big deal when you're in the field. And so they
clean father's body too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. When the four of them, like they've all gotten, essentially they're in their skivvies because they had all gotten out of their own baths, and then they're sitting there with father and they're cleaning his body together. And then this is going to sound weird, but the way they were doing it was almost sensual. But I think what they were getting across was how loving it was. They were doing this as an act of love for their fellow.
It's not sexual. It's not sensual. It was loving. It was taking care of their own, which was also weird because Major Griffin didn't take father with him.
Yes, that's what I was saying. The fact that he left the body.
That was a really weird part of the movie for me. I do enjoy that scene, the loving care they showed towards their brethren. To clean them up.
That really was touching.
Yeah. And so the plot of this movie,
I had tears in my eyes. It was very touching.
And the plot of this movie was essentially the Germans want to surrender, but they can't just surrender without obvious proof of a fight because they're afraid what the Nazi will do to their families back home for the retribution, which was valid.
The contrast was amazing. Yeah.
And so what the plan was just to get there, and they're going to stand in the position so it looked like a fight happened where everyone's sort of positioned right, and then they're just going to fire their weapons into the air. So you saw the proof of the fight. They would have heard the shots back and forth because presumably if they're an advanced party, someone's in the rear for them too. And then they surrender, and if they come and investigate, oh, by the way, here's the proof that they were they were taken out fighting. Mm-hmm. They didn't tell Mother because he was crazy. And he hears so he just runs in and starts shooting, and suddenly the Germans are like, "Oh shit, we've been double crossed," and now it's a slaughter.
That was the most heartbreaking part of this film. That was the most heartbreaking part of that film. Was when that went down, because we were all on board as an audience. Like, yeah, let's make this happen.
And the other part of that's
a good thing.
They were trying. One of the things they captured really well, and I've had this argument with people before because everyone's like, World War II, you can't use this as an example because all of them were Nazis and they weren't. But this idea, there's a running cadence, if I die on the Chinese front, bury me with a Chinese grunt. And the reason that cadence exists, and they change it to the various fronts of various eras, is this idea that the average infantryman has more in common with the infantry soldier in his enemy's army than he often does with the people back home. Because there's some similarities between your existence. And so you see that in this movie, with the Germans, like they have almost as much in common with the Germans as they do with each other, and contrast that with the civilians back home, or the civilian in the form of Major Griffin, who's clearly, other than he dresses up pretty, he is not a soldier.
No.
And so I thought that the commonality of the fighting man was very well captured, down to the games they're playing when the Germans are teasing them at night, where the Americans don't yet know they're being messed with.
Right. The snowball fight.
The snowball fight. The first snowball doesn't come as just a snowball. It's frozen onto the pineapple handle of the German grenade. So when you pick it up, it looks like he just threw a grenade into your trench. Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't go off, and you pick it up, and you're like, oh, it's a snowball. And then real snowballs.
Snowball on a stick that looked like a potato mash from the Germans. And that whole exchange is awesome. They hung a grenade on the tree as an ornament. And
the Germans gave them sausage, the most German thing ever, and alcohol, and the Americans gave them the captured French wine and chocolate from their meal kits. I mean,
mm-hmm.
And that's kind of quintessential.
And the fact that they tried to surrender right then, but it was just, they saw it as the wrong time and the wrong way, so they refused. That was just like, but you kind of get it as well.
No, but it makes sense because that German was like, if we gave up without a fight, our families would be tormented or gone after. It's like, I get it. Like we dealt with stuff like that in Iraq.
Well, I mean, he's tried to hand him his, what was it, his pistol? Or?
His pistol. No, that was a Christmas gift. That wasn't a surrender. That was a Christmas gift.
Okay. And he's like, no.
And father was like, no.
Yeah.
And he put it away, and then he took a pineapple grenade off his kit and gave it to him.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much going on in this movie.
And then they put the grenade on the Christmas tree. And you're getting like the duality of man vibes from Full Metal Jacket, where it's like peace and love on your war helmet kind of vibe, because they hang the grenade on the Christmas tree.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I understood that, because having gone through combat, surviving war, it's just like we're two factions that have been thrust into something that we really didn't want to have a part of. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want to fight you, but I'm here because it's my duty to fight you. And they're on the like, I don't want to fight you. You're an invader. How they saw it, I don't want to fight you either. You know, I have many friends that are like that, you know, on both sides of the coin, like interpreters that were, you know, Iraqi natives and things like that. So it's like, I understand the mentality of this movie. It's very touching. You know, it's probably something I'm going to watch year after year around this season, because it's kind of one of the things that draws me back in.
One of the things that we didn't highlight as much, other than to talk about the scene Nick swears wasn't in the movie, and I'm going to prove to him that it was. But other than that, one of the things about that scene, what it was setting, was basically it's showing you, because you watch a lot of more movies, the one thing they get wrong universally is the age of the soldiers. They're always the average rifleman would have been 18 to 24
in World War II. Yeah,
World War II. And just in general war, military is a young man's game, right? Like the idea, if you live to be old, you're the exception.
Old age and treachery.
Yeah. Live hard and leave a gorgeous corpse, or whatever the expression is. And so when you see that, like, these guys are so sheltered, like they've never even touched a woman before. So their first block leave, they're going into the big city. I think it's supposed to be Los Angeles.
No, it was in Jersey.
Was it in
Jersey? Even though the song they chose was Jersey Bounce, since they're going to the European front, they would have been leaving out of Brooklyn. So it's either New York.
No, but where was that was where they shipped from, not where they were training.
But that event happened when they were getting ready to ship out, if I'm not mistaken. At least that's
could be right. Whatever it was,
it was their last night of liberty before they shipped out.
But that shipping out would have started at whatever base they did their training, and then they would have had some jaunts along the way. So I mean, you could justify it as just about anywhere on the map, from where their base was to where they boarded the plane, train, or automobile to the war effort. But like, so they find this girl. They're looking to get a lady of the evening so they could all lose their virginity, because they didn't want to die.
Tragic girl they found.
And then the girl they find is so tragic. Janice, played by Rachel Griffin, and basically she was there to claim the remains of her deceased fiance, and the only man she slept with. And basically she was about to off herself, and she saw them, and she was basically like, well, let me do this one thing for them before I die. That was very much the image. You got the impression she was planning on offing herself when it was over.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
That's exactly it.
And then they shared that brief moment of humanity, and then you learn at the end that one of Eddie marries her.
Arcarian. Yeah, Arcarian.
Yeah.
Arcarian.
Yeah, the fake Aryan, the fake Aryan officer they make.
And that actor, he did the really good job. He was like, just stand there and look pompous and pretend you have
wasn't Miller. Miller.
It wasn't Miller. It was Avakian. That was it. Avakian. Kevin Dillon.
Yeah.
Avakian was the guy that went.
Kevin Dillon went back to the
Miller disappeared. Avakian. You learn that Miller disappeared. Avakian married Janice, and that was the last they heard of him. And then
sent money.
Wilkins.
Leave that as a spoiler for them. Leave what happened to Mother that shows up in the postscript. Leave that as a spoiler for other people. That
for me,
all I'm going to say is the bet. Yeah.
the hardest part for me was the ending of what happened to everybody, because like you hear about these people when they survive that stuff and they're friends for life, and I never got to experience that. I'm the last one left alive, so I don't have that. So you would want that for those where people are alive, and then you find that is not how it ended up for everybody, and that's kind of almost another level of tragedy on top of what they've already suffered.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
And that it wasn't normal. Like, again, their experience wasn't even normal to their contemporaries because of how they were treated. They had a higher level of unit mortality than most units that, like, from, other than the ones that landed on Omaha and Normandy. Like, their level of unit mortality was significantly above what was normal.
But that humanity. Sorry, say that again.
I said my platoon, my reconnaissance platoon in Iraq, is known as the Lucky Eight. Like, but so we were in some weird shit that should have killed most of us, and it didn't. And we celebrate that every time we get together by mass quantities of booze.
One thing I gotta say,
shouldn't be here anymore.
One thing I'm gonna say is that we mentioned a little bit of Full Metal Jacket earlier, and one of the big things about that was the duality of war. And everything. A Midnight Clear is almost like the intermingling of that duality, of how it merges and blends together and becomes one big morass, where you have the morass of good and evil, of right and wrong, and brotherhood and hatred. You have all those things blending together in the chaos of it all, in the crucible that is war. And it's not a clear delineation. Kubrick got the delineation of the two sides and the duality of all the things going on there, from the aspect of good and evil, life and death. But this is where all the lines disappear.
Well, one of the things that was the most cinematically haunting for me is where Mother is sitting upstairs in the attic, because they had an observation post in the attic.
That's a beautiful scene.
Knott goes up there to talk to him because they're like, dude, is he losing it again? And he's just sitting there staring at these paintings that were in the attic that were hidden up there for safekeeping. And they've kind of all
told Will, look,
and he's looking at the paintings, and he's like, this is a moment where somebody loved someone enough that they captured it on canvas.
And they didn't.
And he's looking at the embodied personification of love.
It's a beautiful scene. It's a beautiful fucking scene. And it's one of the most touching scenes in that movie. When Mother is telling Will, just look at it. And then he explains it to him. He's like, somebody did this out of love, and they probably didn't even do it for money. That's the key phrase in that movie, in that part, is that they probably didn't even do it for money. They did it because they cared.
And so that's one of the things that you should understand is this film, the pictures that they're looking at the chateau. Obviously, the chateau is historic, and so the idea is, it was abandoned because of the war.
Yes,
but so the pictures you're looking at are like Renaissance era paintings, like based on the clothes and stuff. And so at that point in time, art was done on a patronage system, and so there's no real profit in it. You're getting paid. Your living is being covered, and in return, you're painting, right? Which is not a bad deal. I mean, so he's living off because he's painting, but it's not like I'm giving you, a gold coin for that picture. I'm going to feed you either way. So this is just part of your daily work, and that kind of, I don't know, it was beautiful.
And the fact that Mother goes on towards the very end of that soliloquy, and he's like, I didn't know that such love still existed in the world. And that was the thing. That's when you sort of see the real gift of that painting to Mother. That is his lifeline to sanity, that there is something out there. And then that Knott makes the bet with him. And leave that as a spoiler for what the bet is. And that was really touching. And that's what makes the postscript at the end of the film even that more poignant, especially with how it's handled. Like you said, everybody expects friends for life, always connected, and it's like everything just sort of drifts apart. but yet that's still, in the end, you're still left with the realization that even so, there's that golden thread of love. It's still in the world, and that what the wound of war can heal, and that is the bittersweet gift that's left at the end of this movie, that sort of illustrates, in the darkest of darks, the smallest ray of light is bright as the sun. And this one moment is at least something you can look on.
And I know this is going to sound morbid, but we're going to end this on a positive note, and that is the death of Father. When he died, and he's abandoned by Major Griffin, Lieutenant Ware, although Ware didn't really get a choice. And then they're told, stay here. And then when the Germans attack, because we know it's coming in a week or two, let us know and then leave. And then they're supposed to radio it in, and you find out two things. One, the Griffin just abandoned them. He just cut the line and just left. So they were never supposed to live. My understanding is you could interpret it in a lot of ways. Incompetence, frantic, but my interpretation of he was just so indifferent to their very existence that it didn't even occur to him to worry about his troops. And so having been in the military and suffered under bad leadership, like that hits a little differently. But even still, like just at surface level, I think anybody can watch that and understand, holy crap. And so this is where the humanity that I talked about, the goodness comes in. When the fighting starts and they're realizing, holy crap, we got to get out of here, they saved his body and they risked slowing them down to take him with them. At first, he's strapped, almost crucified, to this wooden thing to hold him in place.
Oh, to the back of the Jeep.
Yep. To a litter.
To a litter. Yep. And then when he gets there, when he gets to the point where they've got to abandon the vehicles because they run out of gas.
Yep.
They never abandon his body. They're still carrying it by hand. And then at the end, he's already dead. Father is, obviously. And they're like,
a couple days dead at that point.
Yeah, we're trapped behind enemy lines. They tore all the signs down, so we don't even know which way we're going. Are we going to the enemy? Are we going to our side?
Well, and they said in the movie, like, are we heading to Berlin or are we heading to friendly lines? Yeah.
Right. And they're and that was a real concern because they did. Both sides were tearing down the yard post that told you which direction where was, right? And so they're hiding in this improvised foxhole, which they showed a very good job of them using the fighting positions the way they would have. That part,
they dug in good.
And you watch it
move by.
Yeah, you watch the SS go by, and not as like if we keep our weapons, we're combatants behind enemy lines. If we abandon it, worst case scenario, they'll let us surrender. And if we get to our lines and we have abandoned our combat gear, we could tell them we were POWs and we got briefly away.
They hit that motherfucker with a statement of fucking charges. That's the most military.
I noticed that, but I'm not. Let's get that to the end.
Fuel, the weapons, they hit him with all.
Stop. Let's get that at the end. When they realize that they're going to have to risk going to German concentration camp prison systems, and at this point in the war, they knew about Auschwitz and the like. They knew what they were going into in a German prison. And they said, well, if we're going to surrender, and that's where they take the blood of Father and they wipe it on themselves, almost biblical significance, and they paint the cross on their uniforms to look like the Red Cross at a distance.
Yep.
And they're carrying his body. And that was he sacrificed himself again for his men. Father did. And the significance of father and mother as call signs, or as nicknames, I guess, not call signs, that was just beautiful. I think that the layers in that scene were like art film meets good film meets war movie. I mean, it had a little bit of everything.
Well, it begs the question, JR, what was your nickname in your platoon?
Pork chop.
There it is.
But before that, because I had a college degree, I was the professor. Then my first mission, I ran. My first mission, I ran with a guy who was a lieutenant. He played rugby in college. So did I. We played against each other. I broke his nose. He dislocated my shoulder. So when he saw me, he called me Rugby. And they're like, why does he call you that? And I said, sometime you'll have to get him to tell you about what happened to his nose.
All right. So my call sign over there in Iraq was Rogue 4.
And then I became Pork Chop. later. That's what stuck.
My nicknames within the platoon was Garb Nuts because my last name's Garber, and I like to show my nuts to the platoon. I guess I don't know. So it was Garb Nuts. They called me Prof because I was the most highly educated amongst my group. So that stuck. Pretty sure it's on my 201 file, but whatever. So it's like it's shit like that. That's one of the things I also enjoyed about the movie.
I was also Handsy and Handjob got thrown around a lot with a last name like Handley.
Oh my God, Handjob. Yeah, that's not going away anytime soon. Thank you.
Just make sure it's keeping us in. We don't lose our safe for work rating. But yeah, so like
I want to chuck one other bit of symbolism on you when you mentioned the gift of father. There is think of the biblical aspect of the communion.
That's what I was thinking of when I watched that.
Mm-hmm. This is my body given to you. This is my blood shed for you. And both things technically happen in the process of saving their lives.
And
it does have a salvation metaphor.
They have but the scene where they got the blood from him, they could have just cut a vein and they had him laying on his stomach, the canteen under his mouth, and they were just pushing on him till the blood poured out of his mouth. And somehow the way they got the blood made it just like it added something to it. I think they could have done it any way that would have been more gruesome, but even when they took his blood to save themselves, it was a loving act.
It was respectful. It was respectful. It was almost as if Father was giving willingly and knowingly. I mean, Frank Wally, you gotta realize how much just acting like a dead guy. He does has to do the full Weekend at Bernie's. But he actually, I don't know how much body control it actually takes to do that. But you think about it, he was still able, as a corpse, to generate a lot of emotion out of that part. It's weird to say it that way, but.
So the book, is called A Midnight Clear, a novel. It was written by William Wharton. I don't know what he did for his book, but I'm probably going to end up reading the book now. But the symbolism of that was just beautiful. And then when they survive all of that against all of the odds that you see, everything that's been stacked, it's just like they just keep beating them and beating them. And just when you think they're down, they dig a pit so they can beat them down more. And then when they finally make it back to the rear, that's when they're hit with the double whammy. The Jewish character,
the grave registrar scene, that made me go, Gah!
Yeah, that was brutal.
I didn't know about the dog tags. I never knew about what the dog tags are used for.
When they slammed him in his mouth? That's exactly what they're for.
I didn't know. That was probably the most shocking thing in the entire film for me.
That was common knowledge, but I grew up in a military town, so that didn't even twig on my radar. But no,
I never knew.
When they get that's
yeah, I can see how that would be kind of I don't know, shocking.
Yeah, think of it the first time you actually learned about that.
Yeah, like they told that to us in the beginning. When you asked, like, why the two dog tags? One goes in your mouth, it's clamped in your jaw. The other one stays around your neck or goes around your toe. It's a literal toe tag.
Yep.
And then on top of that, like when I wore the one around my neck that had the toe tag on it, so they could always dislocate it if they needed it. But then we put one in our boot too, in case we got blown up and the lower half was separated from the upper half.
Oh yeah, I had multiples. I had one that I kept on my boot with it said DNR on the boot, and I have this tattoo on my side here of all my information just in case. And then I had the one around it wasn't around my neck. It was looped in on my belt and tucked in my back pocket.
That would have been smarter than wearing it because it got annoying when it would slam into the chest plate of your flak jacket. But anyway, so they get back. They get back. They survived everything that this crappy leadership threw at them, and then they find out the character father. No, that was father died.
The
Jewish character
Schutzer. They're Jewish avenging angel.
Yeah, so they find out he died and he shouldn't have, because remember they called that the $1 million wound that gets you sent home. Right?
Yeah, because it was like just
it was through and through on the shoulder.
Yep.
And then
killed him. That's I called bullshit when they said he died.
That's why there's always been a little niggling doubt in the back of my head that Major Griffin did something.
I'm thinking Griffin snuffed him out.
Yeah. But no, that's the irony is when they're taking him home, he's like, it's the $1 million wound, and the irony is I'm the only one that doesn't want it because he wants to stay in the fight and keep killing Nazis as a Jewish man.
Right.
Right. And the hard part is, I mean, this is late enough in the war, it's not unbelievable. But if you see that stuff early war, they're speaking from hindsight that the average soldier wouldn't have known. Like, obviously, everyone knew he was rounding the Jews up.
So,
no one knew about the gas chambers yet.
We're talking about December 1944, the Nazis surrender in May of 45, the Japanese surrender in August of 45 after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If you look at the historical timeline, the war was pretty much done. Especially the Germans saw it. Those guys saw it. And we saw that in the film. It's like, hey, we don't want to die. We've already survived this bullshit. So, like, we just kind of don't want to die. I know?
Yeah.
And Americans treated German soldiers very well as POWs. Historically.
Some of them were actually housed in the Hampton Roads area. Outside the Virginia Beach Central Library, there's a plaque because it's not too far from where there was a German concentration.
Some of them got to take up shop in San Francisco, and they had day passes. Like they lived a pretty freaking good life as POWs. Historically.
There's a play. Okay, so like I said, I used to live in northeastern Wisconsin, and one of the things that my parents would do is go camp host at Peninsula State Park, which they have an outdoor theater that they would do every night. And one of the seasons they did, I'm blanking on the name of the play now. They did a play about POWs coming in for the cherry harvest, because cherries in Door County, Wisconsin, is like absolutely huge. And so it was, and they did a play on the German POWs on how they basically worked and lived on the farm and became sort of part of the community.
Some of them escaped at the end of the war because they didn't want to go home to Germany.
Yep.
And one of them changed his name. Only one of them managed to stay unfound, and he turned himself in like the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading a book, and it was like 6th or 7th grade, about cherry harvests in that region during the internment of World War II. And yeah.
And so for a little bit of
there is books about this shit.
So for a little historical record, though, the reason I mention that is a lot of times they have soldiers knowing about the concentration camps and the like before. But the first concentration camp liberated was in Lublin, Poland in July of 44. This is winter of 44. There's plenty of time for that to have circulated around to the troops. So the idea that he knows about that kind of stuff was actually historically fine. And so the fact that he didn't want to go as a guy from, New York area, Jewish kid who wants to get revenge, like that worked. And so the fact that he's the one that got the wound was like the height of irony, right? Like the only guy that didn't want it is the one that gets.
That's the funny part too. Is like he was the Jewish kid in the fucking platoon. He took a round. That's well before we knew about Auschwitz and all.
He took the round in the winter of 44. That summer they had liberated concentration camps in Poland.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah, so they would have known about it. Now they hadn't gotten the big one in Dachau, in Auschwitz yet, but they had started liberating the minor camps in the outlying region, so they knew about it at this point. The summer of 44, they started finding them because that's when Germany hit their high water mark, and then they started retreating inwards again. And so, but the reason I mentioned that, so they survive all of that. They get to the rear. They find out that the unit just abandoned them at the orders of this major. That's number one. Then they get to find out about their guys that they saved, the German they tried to save, and their own guy. And oh, by the way, they died. And they're like, and they even say that they shouldn't have killed them. And the lieutenants was like, yeah, we didn't even get to question the German. So like, it wasn't even like, we didn't even get that out of it. That's it. And then he runs into, well, we're going to, as punishment, we're breaking up the INR unit, and you're just going to be regular grunts, and we're going to assign some tankers to fill your unit out. And we're just going to send you to fight the rest of the year of the war. They didn't know it was going to be a year, but they're going to ride out the war as just basic infantrymen. That's kicker already. And then they get hit with a statement of charges with the stuff they had to abandon because they were fleeing for their freaking lives, abandoned by the U.S. military. Now, could that have happened? Absolutely. Could they have fought it and won? Absolutely. That is, I mean, we sent some statement of charges for guys that abandoned equipment in the fall of Afghanistan. They retracted every time. So, like, but the idea that the major would want to do it is where the kicker comes in.
Yep. That was just sort of like the last stab. And if you want, and you're watching Ethan Hawke in that scene, just you could tell he was like, felt gutted by just that last bit of indignity.
And the lieutenant looked like he wanted to cry when he's telling his men that.
Yeah.
And he doesn't make excuses for command and say, this isn't what I wanted, because that's the mark of a good leader is at the lowest level possible, your troops need to think the order came from you. You can't say, I know this order sucks, but what are we going to do? The colonel gave it to us. You have to take the order, give it, and like carry on smartly. Like, you can't just blame the upper guy. That's bad leadership. So the fact that the lieutenant, that's drilled into you from PLDC on, from the NCO Academy on. And so the fact that this lieutenant's like, yeah, you're getting statement of charges, there's nothing on his face. I mean, he looks like he wants to cry, but he made no excuses. Like, you, in that one scene, they showed you that they, on the one hand, they had the major that hated them and wanted to murder them all. It was a crappy leader, but they had Lieutenant Ware, who just, you know, was, in spite of everything, was struggling to try to protect him, and it was killing him that he couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one thing I miss at the end is you don't ever find out what happens to Lieutenant Ware or Major Griffin. Major Griffin, you want to hear that he took a spray round before the war was over. And you want to hear Lieutenant Ware, you know, because you just felt for the guy. Like, he was just beat down by working for this guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was, the indignity of it all just was such heartbreaking.
And I know I said that was the uplifting. The uplifting was the way they portrayed the sacrifice of father with his body and the religious overtones. And like, he died for his people 3 times, right? Like, once trying to save the Germans, once when, you know, they used his body to sort of, because when they had him strapped to a cross to the back of the Jeep, it makes it look like, because maybe this is a medical precaution, like it makes them less potentially of a target if they follow Geneva Convention style.
They mimic the crucifixion too. There's a corollary with that.
Right, but then at the end he gives his blood, so he suffers for them one more time.
Many times.
Yep.
Many times. It's a very heartwarming film.
It's a movie that'll make a lot of guys cry.
I'm not going to say that. No, I'm not going to say it. Like, I did tear up because I understand that brotherhood. I understand that camaraderie. I understand that connection, especially when they said they were an INR unit. I was in an INR unit. We did things the same way. Like, even though I was the highest ranking member of that unit, nobody called me sergeant. And within our unit, like out in public to do military procedures and whatnot, like, they would call me sergeant, but like when it was just us, I was Nick. You know, it's like, hey Nick, what do you think, man? And I always brought it up. Every decision I ever made, I brought to the group discussion, just like Will did. How do we do this? Like, what do you guys think?
So let's talk about that real quick, and that'll be the thing. One of the things that they show that this movie did a really good job capturing is the vagaries and the fickleness of fate, right? Like, the reason not was the sergeant and not the other guy who he was going to advice on, I'm drawing a blank on the character's name, was because the one that had the more experience and probably should have been the sergeant, was in the medical tent suffering from trench foot when they needed the new sergeant. So it went to naught.
Oh, Vinny or
Vinny, yeah.
Or something like that.
And so for me, like the layers they put on this movie with the undertones were just.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, I don't like movies that try to be too much, but this one just worked for me.
It's a very subtle film, all in all, because it's about the nuances of the characters more than anything else. It's not a big war film. It is a holiday film, but it's a holiday film that's got a different. Yeah, it's very personal, and a writer can learn a lot just watching this on how to tell so much through subtext. There are so many things that are not said that you pick up loud and clear in how they act with each other. I mean, I watched pieces of it last night, and then one of them, of course, was when they first got to the chateau, and they're starting to feel kind of good because, hey, we get to be indoors and not in tents. And the two guys say, hey, let's show them how we did it in the USO, and that impromptu Jersey bounce. Then that led into the whole scene with Janice and it happened, which I still say is that whole sequence is still extremely touching. As weird as it is on paper, it's handled with such tenderness is about the best word I can call for it. In how she is with them, because they're at the beginning of their adventure and she's kind of at the end of hers, and how the two ships pass in the night. And then, like I said, the postscript ties some of that up. But yeah, that's it's all about that interpersonal relationship and doing good in the meat grinder that is war.
And that's the one thing I did like, that Vance and Avak, or however you say that guy's name, Akavian. Like, I like that they ended up together and they linked it back to the beginning.
Avakian.
They looped back to the beginning with the her getting a little bit of something better. Because like, I don't know.
She survives.
Maybe it hits home because, like I say, Grandma was a nurse in World War II. That's how she met Grandpa. It was love at first stitch, I guess, because she was stitching him up after he got wounded at St. Lo. And so, like, seeing her, like, humanizing the home front side of things is often not done very well.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to war movies about World War II. They either go too far into the Rosie the Riveter and ignore the real sacrifices of the everyday homemaker and the wife who's just trying to keep the kids, going while daddy's off to war. And they tend to make it like a political thing, and we're not going to go here. But I thought this was handled so deftly that it didn't like get people of either side politically skewed. It just focused on the humanity of it.
Interesting little side note. Rachel Griffin, who plays Janice in the film, she marries Keith Gordon, the director. And Keith Gordon, most people don't realize his two biggest films as an actor, because he has directed a heck of a lot of films, it's turned out. But his two biggest, most known films, I guess I would say, was Christine, where he plays Arnie, the main character.
I love Arnie.
Yes, or Back to School, he plays Jason Mellon, which is Rodney Dangerfield's son.
Oh, no.
Oh.
Yeah, that Keith Gordon. Best friends with Robert Downey Jr. So
looked like a poster child for birth control.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite movies, Back to School.
Yeah.
Used to watch it every summer, like I wore the tape out because it was so good. I thought it was awesome. That was my first introduction to Robert Downey Jr. Like, I love that movie so much. I love it so much.
It's also your first interaction with Sam Kinison.
To be honest, that is not my first introduction to Sam Kinison, because my parents were huge Sam Kinison fans and left the tape of his comedy special And I watched it. I was like, oh God, like it made me so popular in like 8th grade.
Yep.
So as we wrap this up, this is where I will remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book. So seriously, it does matter, including on movies, because the good movies don't get made if people don't watch them, buy them, rent them, whatever. So you're helping keep the art you love alive when you take a moment to review it. So with that out of the way, is there anything you are looking forward to specifically for this Christmas as 2024 wraps up? Although it feels like just yesterday we were celebrating New Year.
I'm just praying for sanity in the year to come at this point.
Fair.
That the adults can be back in charge, please, Lord.
Okay. All right. So I am working on, like, I had some life issues to deal with, so I'm getting books out again, although we're still stacking them, so it might be a little bit before they get published, but I'm getting books written again, so that's my happier note. I hope to have more come out in 2025. I have a anthology that has just launched called Beast Hunt Volume 1. It is published through Three Ravens. It has one of my last finished works with James Ward. We wrote it shortly before he passed. So if you want that collaboration of what could have been beautiful magic if he'd stuck around to write that series, check that out. That anthology's got some good stories in there, some really good stories in there. I know I say that because it's got my name on the cover, because it's my imprint.
Be proud.
But they're good stories, and I think you should check that out. Beast Hunt Volume 1. We should have another dragon anthology because, like I said, James got me hooked on dragons coming out. I think Fires of Retribution or Deadly Fire, something like that.
Deadly Fires.
Deadly Fires. There we go.
I can mention that.
That'll be coming out in January, so look for it. And tell us what's your happy Christmas memories. What's your favorite Christmas book? If you want a copy of Sleigh Bells Ring and you've got a Spotify account, hit me up. I'll give you a code to get a free download. It'll last as long as the codes last. They're going to disappear when the book gets moved over next month. So, you're helping me out by letting them get used by somebody who will listen and leave a review. It's a win-win. What about you, Nick? Are you looking forward to anything this Christmas?
Just happiness to my family as they open gifts, and hopefully I provided well for them. That's.
I guess for me, you've already been there with your kids, but mine, like my youngest just turned 16 and my oldest will be 18 shortly. And so for me, it's like, holy crap, where did all that time go? Just yesterday, I was at the hospital and they were getting spit out. So for me,
I'm a stepdad. My stepson, who don't share this with anybody because they'll fucking deny it. I love dearly.
We won't tell him, and nobody's listening. It's okay.
He's going to turn 15 on Christmas Day. He's a Christmas Day baby. He's a fucking idiot, but
we all were at that age.
But I'm slightly proud of the little fucker. So he takes initiative of me and what I do and what I have done. He asks questions. I turn him into a Cincinnati Bengals fan. So get ready for heartbreak, fucker.
So
they're never gonna fucking win. You might as well be a Lions fan at this point.
Or a Browns fan.
Vikings.
Shit. Vikings. Oh my god. Like
anyway.
That's a whole other show. No, I'm low-key proud of the little fucker. I'll never tell him it to his face because I'm a Gen Xer and I'm going to raise him like a Gen Xer where your happiness is meaningless and your sorrows are bullshit. Get tougher.
Speaking of Gen X, I'm just saying that 70s show, I watched it, when it was first run. The older I get, the more Rhett Foreman makes sense to me. I'm like, dude, I get it. Fat, dumb, and stupid is no way to go through life. Is that what the expression was?
Yeah.
I have a hangover. Do you know what that is? That's your brain trying to comprehend your stupidity. That's a Red Foreman.
So, all right. With that, bon cher, what are you writing at the moment?
I am finishing up editing for a entry into the next pinup noir, Sultry Murder Jazz for Rack Press, and then I am switching back over to a submission for another publisher that is tentatively titled, and it's probably going to stick, Mech Family Robinson, which is a mashup, for lack of a better term, of Swiss Family Robinson, BattleTech, Pitch Black, and maybe a little Sound of Music.
Nick, I might need a moment. I'll be in my bunk. And then if anybody wants to track you down on the interwebs, and as usual, all of the links will be in the show notes. I will link to the movie and the book and the movie trailer of A Midnight Clear. I think you guys should love it. If you watch it and like it, talk about us in the comments, email us, reach out. Seriously, we have a discussion. There's depth here that could be fun to explore. But if they wanted to track you down to get more of your writing, how might they find you?
Well, the link right beneath me there in the card, www.resonantmedia.art, is sort of one of the best places to link up to all my media locations, because you can also find me on Substack, which has been probably my most active place. I've been posting a lot more of my artwork lately there, and on Instagram under MD Boncher, as well as on Facebook by the same. And if you're interested in music, you can find me under Resonant One on Bandcamp. So those are the biggest places that you can find me at.
All right. And you can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters, the Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our Instagram over there at Blasters and Blades Podcast at gmail.com. Again, Blasters and Blades Podcast at gmail.com for professional purposes only. I do check that at least once a week. I don't always remember because it's not my dedicated personal email over it, but I do check it, so we do use that if people want to book or you just reach out to me individually, but it's for professional purposes only, people. If you want the shenanigans, go to Madam Stabby Stab on the Instagram, Twitter, and the emails, and send her some hate and discontent. She'll love it. She'll engage in kind. She might send you a lot of TikTok videos and GIFs about stabbing you, or GIFs. I don't know.
Might be a picture of a cat's asshole.
And then you can go to our website on Spotify. It's a bunch of gobbledygook. So just go to the link tree, hit the Spotify link, and you can go there and listen to the audio only if you prefer. Or we're on all the podcast platforms because Spotify distributes for us. And then you can support the show and help keep the lights on. These episodes are not free to produce. And every penny helps. And if you want to help support the show, go to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it's for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee till it pours out of their hair, and Nick's hair will be brown again. No more gray, sir.
It's going to stay gray.
I'm waiting for my supplies.
And so you could also support the show by going to Coffee Brand Coffee using the link in the comment section. The code podcast grunts gets you 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. It is not a drop shipping operation. It is an American company roasting beans in America, hiring American employees. So, it's shop local, and in that, at least shop, your own country. I think all of us doing that help limit the amount of wasted miles products travel all around the globe before they come back to you. Shopping local is something I'm passionate about. Supporting local businesses is something I'm passionate about. So do your part. Check out Coffee Brand Coffee. It's delicious. Stabby and I go to town on that stuff. We think you'll like it too. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. And since this is not our last Christmas episode, but we are recording it in the order last, I would like to remind you that we will have happier episodes because you will be listening to an episode review of Elf next. So we will end on a high note before the end of the...
Oh my God, I love Elf.
Elf was a good
one. The young ones don't stop.
I know this was a little bit of a downer, but the movie was beautiful for all there was darkness. And so I still think you should check it out.
It really is. I agree with you on that one. It's a sombering film, but the spirit in which it was created is amazing, and it will touch your soul. So take that from Nick.
And he doesn't even have a soul. He sold that one years ago for extra dip.
And a small bottle of bullet. So I didn't get robbed on the deal. But from my black little heart and this movie, it's very touching. It made me tear up. It made me sorry, I'm actually tearing up right now.
It's a beautiful movie. I think you guys are going to like it. I know it's underrated. It didn't earn out at the box office. We don't know when they stop tracking the money for that. Hopefully, we'll get a revival and make it a cult classic.
It deserves
it at its finest.
The movie makes me remember The Boys. So if you had a special connection with a core group of people, whether it's combat related or not, doesn't matter. This movie will make you feel that. It'll make you remember The Boys. And fuck.
And with that, we're going to end before Nick starts crying on film. It's ugly crying his mascara.
I'm about to.
And with that, Merry Christmas. Enjoy your time with your family. The moments pass too quick. You're going to blink and it'll be gone, and you'll wonder why your kids are grown and living halfway across the country. So
check on your loved ones. That's the message. That's the message of the goddamn movie. Check your fucking loved ones, man.
It's 10 o'clock.
And with that.